Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa salatu wa salam ala ashrafil anbiya wa sayyid al mursaleen. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu to the MCMC community. Welcome everyone. Today we are actually going to be tackling an extremely important topic for all of us, the topic of atheism. Just a very brief setting the context before I turn it over to our lead for today. The atheist framework, the atheist thinking permeates so much of modern life. In colleges and universities, in the news, on the news channels, in entertainment, in books and magazines, on social media, the atheist thinking dominates. The atheists' suppositions, their conclusions, belief in God, in revelation, in prophets is ridiculed as something lacking intellectual and rational basis, as the opiate of the masses. Paradoxically, a universe without a creator coming into existing by itself, with matter and energies and forces that are fine-tuned to the most precise degree, and not just with matter and energy, but also consciousness, that is considered rational. So today, alhamdulillah, we are joined with Mawlana Shakeel Rahman, who will help us think through these topics. He was born and raised in the United States. He got his education from Darul Quran wa Sunnah in Queens. Along with studying traditional Islamic sciences, he also memorized the Quran, and he also has a degree in a BA in psychology from the City College of New York. He has spent over a decade conducting talks and programs for the youth, and currently he is the Imam of the Islamic Center of Burlington in Massachusetts. I heard this presentation that Mawlana Shakeel did at ICMC, the Islamic Center of Mercer County, a while back, and it was very beneficial, and I reached out to him, and alhamdulillah, he accepted to help us also think through this and to remove the seeds of doubt, because the most dangerous aspect of atheism is that it plants seeds of doubt. It is couched in rationality, and those seeds then unfortunately germinate and take hold. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce and turn it over to Mawlana Shakeel Rahman, who will take us through the next 1.5 hours, a little bit more maybe, and walk us through this.
Jazakallah khairan, Brother Zija. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept from yourself and accept from your community, and for all the brothers and sisters who contributed to making this program reality. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept it and allow us, inshallah ta'ala, to, by this program, allow us to remove the doubts in our hearts, the doubts in hearts of others, and grant us a beautiful walk to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in this life, and grant us Jannatul Firdaus in the hereafter. Ameen ya Rabbal Alameen. Alhamdulillah wa kafa wa salamun ala ibadi alladhina astafa amma ba'd. فأعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قالت رسلهم أفي الله شك فاطر السماوات والأرض. So today's program, inshallah ta'ala, will be about, like our beloved brother had introduced in the beginning, about atheism. And so I want to mention from the get-go, it is a little bit of a longer program than you're normally used to. And so please get yourself seated. I heard that the snow is coming down in your areas, so might as well get the hot coffee and the cocoa out, mashallah. And so that way you can really take as much benefit as you can. I'm at your service for the next 2 hours or however long we're here for, inshallah. And I don't mind any questions that you have, as long as they're related to the topic. I will try my best to help out and provide some thoughts on every question that you provide, inshallah. And I would humbly request Brother Zija to, inshallah ta'ala, if you can just monitor the questions, etc., and we can take them during the breaks, inshallah ta'ala. So having said that, this topic is of crucial importance, like was mentioned, and we see it for myself. I've seen it in my cousins, I've seen it in my families. Many of us have family members who have adopted atheism, and they have completely abandoned Islam. And sometimes we have questions in ourselves, and the reason why this program is called Why Me is that in reality it all kind of comes back to this question: why is God doing this to me, right? And I hope, inshallah ta'ala, by the end we get a beautiful answer for that for ourselves, and provide contentment for the hearts, inshallah. So there are three parts to this program. We're going to talk about atheism in brief. Now, we don't have enough time to go through it in detail like I wanted to, but it's because of the shortness of time. We'll condense it as much as we can. The existence of God will be the main discussion that we'll have, and then the issue of the problem of evil, which we'll address near the end, inshallah ta'ala, which is the most enjoyable part for us as Muslims. Really, it really is. And so the last thing I'll say before we begin is that make sure, inshallah, that for yourselves, whenever you have a question, it is required of you, and especially about your faith, it is required of you and me that we go to a scholar and we get this question addressed. Any doubts we have about our faith and beliefs, it's wajib. It is a requirement of our religion that we go and ask questions. فَاسْأَلُوا أَهْلَ الذِّكْرِ إِن كُنْتُمْ لَا تَعْلَمُونَ. Ask the people of remembrance if you don't know. And so we have to remember this. Don't allow yourself to suffer from doubts and allow it to creep into your hearts, and then allow it to poison your worship, and then ultimately maybe it will take us off the path. We ask Allah for tawfiq and guidance, and allow us to be on the straight path to the day that we meet Him, inshallah ta'ala. So atheism, I think many of us already know that the word atheist or ism is not a theist, right? Someone who doesn't believe in God. And so it's a very generic term. In traditional and historic, and when we look at it historically speaking, it was used for a lot more than just a person who didn't believe in God at all. It's also used for people who had deviated in their beliefs. So anyone who wasn't a theist, who believed in the oneness of God, would sometimes be called an atheist too. So it was a very, very general term, and you see it throughout Christian writings, etc. That's the term atheist. In terms of agnostic, is someone that you and I could, we probably have met people like this, who they don't say that, I believe in God. They don't say that I don't think God doesn't exist or whatever. They just say that we don't know what's out there. It's just a mystery. And so that's a person we might traditionally meet with in our lives, or maybe the first one as well. So I want to give you a brief timeline. We look here. And again, I would spend a bit more time on this, but shortness of time won't allow us to do that. So atheism really starts off with, and I'll explain why near the end, about how it really starts off with Iblis. He's the source of these doubts and source of these ideas and thoughts. He's the first one to go and say to Allah, "Oh Allah, because you misguided me, because you did this evil," right? So he's the first one to attribute this type of the problem of evil that we say, you made this happen to me. This all started with him. So he's the source of these doubts. And so it goes further into history, into the Greeks. Atheism really starts to rise with these Greek philosophers. You get people like Epicurus and Democritus and these various other philosophers of the time who really bring out these same atheistic ideas. And so these thoughts of the Greek philosophers it has its small little clique. People start to vibe with it, and they have these small little schools that they have, but it doesn't get any bigger than that. So then it kind of just dies out for a long time. And you'll notice between the Greeks and Christian Europe, which is the 1600s, there's a huge gap of time. And the reason why that is because during the middle of all that, the reason why atheism didn't really get a chance to spread is that you really have, mashallah, and it's a historical fact, it's not just something I'm saying, but because Islam was a dominant force in the world, and because it's such a religion, an amazing religion that allows the freedom of religion. It was an accepted principle that people are not forced or coerced into their faith. And so because of that, even atheists who would write intellectual tomes and different articles against Islam, and they would refute Islam, and even Christians who would refute Islam, and Jews who would object to Islam, would all be living within Islamic lands. A very famous area is called the area of Cordoba, Qurtuba. Qurtuba was a place where Imam Qurtubi, the famous Mufassir, the commentator of the Quran, he writes about how he would very regularly meet the rabbis and Jews, and he would meet the priests and the Christians, and he would engage with them and discuss with them. And so they had this type of scholarly discussion without any type of animosity or things like that in between. So Islam really allowed people to express who they were, and because of that, this atheism didn't really find ground to grow. Thereafter, we find within Christian Europe, though, Christian Europe is an entirely different discussion because of the fact that there were a lot more stringent rules. You and I both know that the church at that time was the supreme law of the land, and for you to even consider disbelief would be such a heresy and such a atrocity that they would maybe subject you to being given the capital punishment, for example. Right, so there's a lot of bad stuff that happens within Christian Europe, where atheism starts to find its rise again, and a lot of different issues with Christianity that don't seem to make sense for the atheists. We'll get to some of them, hopefully, inshallah, later. And then finally, it goes to the Enlightenment, where these philosophers who really take up the Greek thought from so many years ago, they take it, and these philosophers, you might know them as Voltaire and many others, that they take these ideas and they further them. And then in the 1800s, we find that the theory of evolution, where Charles Darwin takes his historic trip to the Galapagos Islands, and then he looks at the finches, etc. Because of that, the atheism found its intellectual or scientific backbone, so that way it could survive, so that way it could thrive, and it could find a reason to say that now we have a reason. Like Dawkins said, he said that Darwin made it possible to be an intellectually fulfilled atheist, right, or intellectually satisfied atheist. And then in the 1900s, we see the disgusting plant of atheism to grow into the state religions. And what happens is, many of these countries that we find, unfortunately, what happens is they adopt atheism as their state religion, meaning that they reject any other faith, right? Nazism, you get Soviet Union, you get all these different countries that come out to say we're atheists, we don't believe in any formal organized religion. And there's a lot of bloodshed, a lot of violence that occurs because of it, right? And so there's something that it is a guilty conscience that a lot of atheists have to live with, that if you don't live with the moral code, a organized or structured moral code, you got to deal with that baggage too, you know. And so it did lead to such things like this as well. And then finally to new atheism, which we're going to talk about inshallah ta'ala. Okay, so, and if you have any questions, please feel free. Okay, and this is just again giving a brief summary of what Jesus spoke about. It emerged with Iblis. Seeds were planted in the Roman Empire before Christianity in about 300 BC. It lays in the ground for centuries until the 1600s, right? And then it begins to find water and soil as religion and science begin to conflict or clash with each other. Okay, it sprouts up during the American and French revolutions. You'll notice that, you know, you could really argue this, that one of the first quote unquote secular, or quote unquote even, you know, say separated from religion, the first country to really embed that or to take that into their principles is America. America really just, you know, from the get-go was like, we're just going to separate church and state because of reasons. But of course, like, you can't, you know, there are little problems, pragmatically speaking, whatever, don't worry about that. But having said that, you know, America and France both take up this hatred towards wherever they came, and a big step towards secularism, right? So, and then finally it starts to bud in the Enlightenment, which is in the 1800s, and it grows into these roots with atheism becoming state religions in the 1900s, and then finally it becomes the wicked plant that we see today with neo-atheism in the 2000s. Okay, so it's a very short timeline. You're like, what? It's 2,300 years. It's very short timeline. We have many religions that survive longer than that. Human beings have been on this earth for longer than that. It's not what I want everyone to understand is, it's not a new issue. There's never been a new issue. A lot of times we tell ourselves this is a new thing. We need new answers, new responses. And I'll let you know that anything I've done for research for this topic has only been through Islamic texts and works, because I've seen that our scholars have already addressed these things over and over and over again. And so this has never been a new issue per se. It's something that the Greeks had come up with, and many of the same questions that they had are the same exact jargon or jumbled mess that the new atheists present today. It's not really anything new. So hopefully, inshallah, we can see that when we discuss these ideas here. So I'm going to jump straight to the 1800s and 1900s just to talk about Charles Darwin. Okay, when he pens his magnum opus, The Origin of Life, I think it should have said satisfied, intellectually satisfied atheist, but I'll confirm it. I'm sorry if that quote, it might be a mistake, but I'll make sure. Richard Dawkins said it, right? In 1900 to 2000, because again, we have to look at the effects. What happens is sometimes we forget that a worldview is not only what you believe about God. Okay, it's not only about what you believe about God. You and I as Muslims have a moral code. We have an ethic. We have certain things that we abide by, certain principles we live by, certain things we consider to be absolutely haram, and certain things we consider that they're permissible or allowed. You know, an atheist, because of the fact that they don't have any universal morals, morality is all subjective. Because of that, they have to live with this baggage that whenever someone wants to take atheism and ride with it and do something absolutely impermissible, absolutely wicked, they can. And so religions, countries that adopted communism, like Russia becomes the first atheistic state. It repressed religions, right? And you know about how much manslaughter and bloodshed was caused in these areas of Russia at the time. China joins in as well. We find around 1970, 22 nations of Central and Eastern Europe became atheistic. So we find this entire growth of atheism all over the European and Asiatic lands. We find Nazism. Hitler emphasized this. He said in one of his talks in 1941, I put in bold for you, National Socialism and religion will no longer be able to exist together. The ideal solution will be to leave the religions to devour themselves without persecutions. So again, they're all spitting the same exact discussions that you're hearing today. It's the same exact thing the atheists of the past have said. And such a terrible atheist like what you're hearing here, or someone who believed in secularism to separate the church and state, like Hitler here, is also in line with these types of beliefs and ideas. Okay, the 21st century, what we find today is new atheism. And why is it such a pertinent or a difficult topic? Is because of the fact that whereas before, back in the 2000s, or I'm sorry, back in the 1900s and etc., all the way down, you were an atheist, but you didn't really force anyone else to become an atheist too. In other words, there was no dawah, there was no invitation to become an atheist. What happens in the 21st century is that nowadays people are actually pushing and shoving this idea of atheism down our throats. So they say things like this: religion should not simply be tolerated, but should be countered, criticized, and exposed by rational argument. And I want everyone to know that the reason why they have such an issue, and one thing that sparked them with so much animosity towards Islam, is because you know what happened on September 11th, right in the beginning of the 2000s. Because of that incident, they considered all religions to be evil and violent. And they considered their target numero uno, the first target on their list, is Islam. Because of that reason, because of what their feelings towards this, they consider a violent religion. Okay. So now we can shift to the discussion of new atheism. So when it comes to new atheists, they consider science, and this is something you're probably noticing too. We love science. I love science. I hope everyone else here loves science too. But scientism as a worldview, that science can explain everything. Okay, and it's not just the fact that it's not enough that one does not believe, but everyone must not believe. Right? They want to give the dawah again. Okay, and don't confuse scientism with Scientology. Two different things, right? Very different things. Scientism again is the idea that science will explain everything, and we see this to be espoused or spread by these new atheists, and they say things like this, that faith is a virus. We also find that there are four horsemen of new atheism. First one that we find is Sam Harris. Sam Harris is an American author, philosopher, neuroscientist. He's a critic of religion. I think his big moments were when he wrote his books, The Moral Landscape and The End of Faith. Those are really big books he wrote. And he believes that Islam has a dogmatic commitment to using violence to defend one's faith, but both from within and without, to varying degrees. He says it is a central Islamic doctrine that is found in other religions to the same degree. He legitimately thinks Islam is a violent religion, and he actually said in one discussion he had that it's just easier to just drop a bomb on them. I just finished them all. So you wonder, who's really violent here? Even the Crusades, such a terrible massacre of human beings and lives, done by one faith, and of course we never blame the followers of the faith. Some people just hijack a religion and they use it for whatever they want, right?
Excuse me, Mawlana, your audio is cracking. There seems to be a little bit of static.
Is it better now?
It was fine the first 15 or so minutes. It just in the last 2 minutes, there seems to be a little bit of cracking, and it's breaking. Let's see how it goes. Maybe you may need to log off and log back on, but let's see how it goes for the next minute or so.
Okay. Please, you can text me too, just so I can see if it's okay.
Okay.
And then if I need to, I'll just log out. Okay, no problem. So Sam Harris. So again, he considers, again, you wonder who's the real the violent people here, because of the fact that they're just their solutions to these problems are unbelievably violent, right? They lead to so many massacres and so much bloodshed. Okay, Sam Harris is number one. We find Christopher Hitchens, who passed away in 2011. He's the English author and journalist. He's a self-acclaimed anti-theist. He says an anti-atheist, a term I'm trying to get into circulation. I don't think he really got it into circulation, but it's someone who is relieved that there's no evidence for such an assertion in God, right? He says organized religion is the main source of hatred in the world. Okay, he calls religions violent, irrational, intolerant, allied to racism, tribalism, and bigotry, invested in ignorance and hostile to free inquiry, contemptuous of women and coercive toward children. It ought to have a great deal on its conscience. Right, that's what he used to say. Okay, Daniel Dennett. We have a third, one of the four horsemen here. Daniel Dennett is an American philosopher. He used to say things like he believes evolution can account for the origin of morality, and he actually has some research into clerics who are secretly atheists. He used to go around interviewing them and say, do you really believe in what you are preaching? I can't believe such people would make things like this into research studies. Allah Ta'ala knows best. And then the final one is Richard Dawkins. Right? He used to be a lot more popular than he is now. I think Joe Rogan is probably more famous than him, right, for sure. So he is an evolutionary biologist, right? And he had a lot of controversial. The most controversial book that he wrote was The God Delusion. And we have many of our scholars who wrote refutations to this book because of the fact that there was a lot of incoherent arguments in there and a lot of issues as well, both on an academic, intellectual, and many other different standards. Having said that, he's not trained, according to as per my knowledge, in philosophy like that, and so that's why he made a lot of simple argument mistakes. And so you have to have some type of training or background in there before you make those types of arguments. So he was confirmed into the Church of England at 13. After learning about Darwinism, he completely lost his faith. Right? And he said, I cannot know for certain, but I think God is very improbable, and I live my life on the assumption that he is not there. Okay, so these are the four, and we want to look at some studies. Atheism is in decline worldwide. This is one study. It said that it's falling from 4.5% to 2% in 2010 and 1.8% by 2020. Okay, we find this in one study. Okay, and it's mainly due to the collapse of the Soviet Union. Okay, and it's also because of other socio-economic factors. You gotta think about our Muslims, mashallah. Like, we have kids by the dozens. For some reason we're not scared of losing wealth and losing risk because we know it's from Allah. Having said that, it's I don't want to call it a fact, but I've seen it to be kind of out there that people who don't believe in God generally have less children. Right? I think there's a study like that too. If you have any, please send it my way. I remember reading things like that. Having said that, people who believe in Allah Subhanahu wa Taala, mashallah, that's actually why France had such an issue, because of the fact that they a couple of generations down, they realized there's so many Muslims because all these Muslims came in so early, and they all the kids start to grow up, be trained in their schools, whatever, and they're like, man, there's so many Muslims here now because of the fact of Muslims, mashallah, just having a lot of children, mashallah. May Allah increase us and give us families like Yusuf alayhi salam, mashallah. Okay, and another, we find 32% of French respondents declared themselves atheist, while an additional 32% declared themselves agnostic. Right, so we're looking at a huge 64% of the entire French population back in 2006. So I'm being quite frank here and quite honest. I think we find this to be the real case, that where we're looking, we're finding more atheism spread because we're finding people who less practice or are less likely to practice on Islam or any other faith in the world. And we generally think of it as on the rise. Okay, but we do find amazing studies. This was a book by Muhammad Hijab, which recently came out. Title's escaping my mind. I'll try to look it up during the break, inshallah, to give you the title. It says, according to the latest religious data from the British Attitude Survey, Muslims are more likely to retain their faith than any other religious group, 93% retention. Moreover, the latest Pew Research study revealed that the share of American Muslims who leave Islam is offset by those who become Muslim. Okay, with 23% leaving the faith in the USA, reasons for leaving include a dislike for organized religion, disbelieving in God, and never connecting with the faith, etc., etc. Okay. So what we find is that there's a lot of conflicting data about it. So I don't want you to think that, oh man, atheism is winning, or we're never going to find victory or success or whatever. Islam will, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, لِيُظْهِرَهُ عَلَى الدِّينِ كُلِّهِ. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see that. So inshallah, let me log off, and I'll join right back in, inshallah.
So, folks, I think we're having a little bit of technical difficulty with the voice. May have something to do with the storm systems that are around. Mawlana Shakeel will just log off and log right back on, and inshallah we'll begin momentarily. Assalamu alaikum. Are you back? Mawlana Sahib, are you back?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes. Okay. I think the sound is much better. Inshallah, let's begin.
Okay, inshallah. So hopefully, inshallah, nothing else happens. I apologize. Maybe just something in the system, whatever. Okay, so again, the most important thing is that we don't become despondent or depressed or saddened by the situation. We remain optimistic. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran says, لِيُظْهِرَهُ عَلَى الدِّينِ كُلِّ, that the religion of Islam will supersede all other faiths. And you have to have that conviction about your deen, your religion, your faith. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will make it victorious on every single platform, on every single plane, inshallah ta'ala. And so don't just follow any statistic. Look at the reality around you and look at the ground level. See what you can do and what I can do to help with this problem, inshallah ta'ala. Okay. And so in summary, right, this is just Bertrand Russell. This is the quote he says. He says, I ought to call myself an agnostic, but for all practical purposes, I am an atheist. I do not think the existence of the Christian God any more probable than the existence of the gods of Olympus or Valhalla. To take another illustration, nobody can prove that there is not between the earth and Mars a China teapot revolving in an elliptical orbit, but no one thinks this sufficiently likely to be taken into account in practice. I think the Christian God just as unlikely. And so what we're going to find, and we're going to see this over and over again, is that atheists of our time and atheists of previous times seem to have a misunderstanding. They consider the Islamic concept of Allah to be the same as the Christian God. And so they have issues with the idea that certain Christians would believe that the earth is only 6,000 years old, whereas Islam doesn't assert that or even claim that in that way. And we don't disagree with the fact that the earth or the universe can be, whatever millions and millions of years old. That's completely fine for us. Same thing with Christians who had an issue with the earth being the center of the solar system or the universe versus the sun being the center of the solar system. Heliocentric versus geocentric models. Muslims have never had issues with accepting either one. That's not a big deal for us because, again, our religion and science don't conflict. And then the biggest kicker would be about evolution, which I wish we had time to discuss and really tackle, but we might not have time for it. The same exact thing about evolution is the same here, is that as Muslims, we really don't have too much of an issue other than the human evolution portion, where if a person were to say a monkey would evolve into a human, that's what we have a problem. In terms of general natural selection, what we see in terms of microevolution, there's really no issues for us. And even macroevolution has a certain level of being acceptability according to us, if a person really wanted to follow that. But having said that, that's the idea here, is that they conflate our religion with Christianity, and that leads to a number of problems. And even the idea of God, you and I know we don't believe in a human God. We don't believe in a God that lives in the universe. We don't believe that a God exists within time and space. We believe that there's a Lord beyond time and space who created time and space. So their idea is completely wrong, as you can see from Bertrand Russell here in 1958. So they have the skepticism, and so what we need to do is, understand that there are a lot of implications and harms. And I'm going to just slide through this real quick, inshallah ta'ala, because again, we want to go towards the final parts of this session, inshallah. Then we'll move towards the existence of God. So the implications of atheism, again, I told you before that a worldview is not just a worldview. It's not just the belief about a God. It's everything else in between. If you believe there's no creator or maker, or there's no purpose behind this universe, it was just randomly made or randomly generated, then you have no reason to hope. Right? Hope and hopelessness are both pointless. There's no point to these things. To be optimistic or hopeful in the future, I mean, what are you hoping on? Right? That something will give you. There's nothing to give you. There's nothing behind it. There's no purpose behind it. So this is an implication of atheism, right? There's no value because human life means nothing. The reason why Sam Harris can just say to drop a bomb on them is because there's no one can really objectively say that there's a reason why a human is greater than anything else in the world, or the reason that why a human being is greater than animals, or even let's just say all of sentient life, or any animals or whatever, how they're greater than any inanimate objects. There's no reason to say a human is greater than, like Hamza Zorsis says, there's no reason to say that a human being is greater than a chocolate bunny. They're all the same because there's no value to anything. We're just a number of randomized atoms put together, and we just ended up having what we have today, right? So no hope, no value, and no purpose, right? When they say things like making your own purpose, you can make your own purpose. That's just another way of just saying we don't really know what your purpose is, but don't go ahead and do what you want. It's the saddest reality that these scientists are so passionate about discovering design, but then they deny looking at the wonders of nature and the universe, and they see all these things, these magnificent things, but they'll never accept that this entire universe was designed like that. It's a tragedy, and this is what you have to understand. Suicide rates have been growing, right, because of the fact that people accept this ideology and this way of life. Then these types of things become realities for people. No hope, no value, no purpose. Okay, so this is again Christianity's failure. It's not Islam's failure, right? What we see in the bold here, the primary target of anti-religious satire was France's official religion, Catholicism, the church's ties to the state, and its control over education. They really hated any connection to Christianity and Catholicism in particular, because of the fact that these guys would not let them study or read the Bible. They wouldn't let them research and learn. Education was very much limited by the church. They were the ones who would decide what would be allowed to be read and not read. And the flip side, you find Islam that prints whatever and whatever and whenever, and not having any type of fear of what we could find out there, because we know Islam has always had an answer to things. And the second thing is that we just love knowledge, right? We love learning. So there are a lot of reasons why it doesn't really apply to Islam. Okay, so we talked about these things before. The issues with science, the heliocentric versus geocentric models, God created the world in 6 days, existing for millions of years, creationism, and the idea that Christians were intolerant of other religions. Right, in 1697, they made the Blasphemy Act, which made it legal to disbelieve in Christianity. You'd be sentenced to death to have any official position, and you didn't believe in Christianity in the proper way that they wanted you to believe in. So because of that, Christianity just had a big headache with atheism, or a big headache with anyone who disagreed with them. And so it caused a lot of problems, right? And intolerance to education, like we just mentioned, they didn't want anyone reading anything beyond what the church wanted them to read. Okay, so our job, in the final slide, inshallah, is that we need to help treat the sickness of the heart by removing these doubts. Okay, that's our job. You and I have to, inshallah ta'ala, be the doctor in the room, be the teacher in the room, be the educator, and help them, inshallah ta'ala, help ourselves and help others by providing them the rational arguments that Islam provides, the rational arguments that our scholars have provided, so that way they can come out of this darkness, inshallah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the guide. He's the hadi. We made dua to Allah that He allows our hearts to be guided, and He allows others' hearts to be guided too, inshallah. But having said that, we need to tackle these two doubts. The first major doubt is about the existence of God, and the second major doubt is, why is there evil in the world? So inshallah, if we'll talk about, does God exist? Brother Zija, do you want to give them a break or anything?
Sure. It's about it's 2:35, right? Maybe if somebody, as you said, I think it's a wonderful suggestion. Go get a cup of coffee or hot chocolate. What I would suggest to everyone, because I've seen this presentation, that get a paper and pencil with you, get a notebook, and write some of these things down, because it really will go through it piecemeal, one by one, and address these doubts. So again, it is 2:35. Inshallah, we'll begin sharply at 2:40 p.m. Just take a quick 5-minute break. For folks who may have joined subsequently, we're just on a very short break. Mawlana Saab went through really setting the context for us, which is, what is atheism? Where does it come from? Why and how did it seem to flourish in certain areas, in certain time periods? And what is our responsibility, more important than anything else in this regard, which he emphasized was to seek out answers by our scholars, our imams, our professors, our shuyukhs, and then equip ourselves with the understanding. So inshallah, we will begin in exactly 3 minutes, around 2:40 p.m.